أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على ثم الصلاة والسلام على آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المظلومين واللعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم صلوات على محمد. Tonight is the third in our series of discussion on the end of negative suffering. I do notice though we are starting a little later than normal. It's I think already 9:05, so we won't finish at 9:30, but inshallah I'll try and keep it brief as well. We have been talking about different types of suffering, and in particular negative suffering, and we have said that it is unnatural in our primordial state. It is unnatural for a human being to suffer any negative form of suffering. And we have been talking again and again about what we mean by negative suffering. And we established that the cause of this negative suffering is being disconnected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in fact, on a finer point, it is impossible to be disconnected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the real cause of the suffering is the illusion of being disconnected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have also said that the veil that causes this illusion is the false sense of I, or the ego. And we identified the causes of suffering to be three. One was the outdated methods of trying to resolve physical and emotional pains. The other was the tendency to live in the past and the future as opposed to the present, which we discussed at length yesterday. So tonight, inshallah, we complete the third cause and the last cause of suffering that we identified as being trapped in the mind, or identifying oneself as being the thinker in one's mind. Before I get to the subject, though, I have been receiving questions from you, and I would like to answer two of these questions that I have received last night. The first question is as follows. It says, is it not reckless and irresponsible to just live in the now and not prepare for the future? Are we not encouraging youths to be impulsive and careless? Because we talked about living in the now. So the question is it right to tell the youths just live in the now? Because you're encouraging them to be, not to do anything about their lives and to just live impulsively. It is important, and I cannot stress enough, that we are not saying, when we say live in the now, we are not saying do not plan for the future. We are saying certainly plan for the future, but don't worry. Don't create a problem out of it and stress out of something that you cannot change in the future. The mind, as we mentioned, is like a tool. Allah gave us intellect as a tool. If you have a hammer at home and you need to do something, you lift it when you need it, you use it. When you're done, you put it down. If you walk around with a hammer everywhere, when you're eating, you're holding the hammer. When you go to bed, the hammer is with you. That is unnatural. So the mind was not meant to be constantly in thought. And as I mentioned, 80 to 90% of our thought is repetitive and useless. And we are addicted to thinking. We identify ourselves as being the thinker in us. And the ego fears that if it stops thinking, it will cease to exist. So the method in which we use our mind is unnatural. But there is nothing wrong in using it and planning for the future without the element of worry or stress or creating what-if scenarios that are unnatural coming into the picture. The second question was, why are you, and I'm paraphrasing this because the question was verbal, so I'm putting it in my words. The question is, why are you using the mimbar to discuss psychology instead of Quran and Hadith? Even if it helps people resolve their problems in life, what is the relevance of this discussion to Islam? This is a mosque. This is mimbar of Rasul. What you're talking about, stress and anxiety and problems and how is it relevant to Quran and Hadith? How is it relevant to Islam? Tough question, isn't it? And we won't get in our discussion that far, but one of the subjects that I was going to touch upon, if time would have permitted, was how this new way of thinking, this new consciousness that is emerging in our society is so related and tied to the return of our Imam Sahib al-Zaman, Ajalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I have come to believe personally that it is because we have not learned to free ourselves from negative suffering. That is why there is a delay in the return of the Imam. Because if you look at the hadith, there is constant narrations that if the Imam had 40 good companions, he would have returned. And we have so many ulama, we have so many learned people. We can produce thousands, and he wants only 40. And there is a hadith to say that the very close companions of the 12th Imam will all be urafa. They will all be enlightened. And Allah has a principle that He does not fix problems using miracles. Miracles are only used to demonstrate the proof of prophethood or imamat. But when a thing has to be fixed, Aballahu an yajri al-ashya illa bi asbabiha. Allah has refused for things to happen except through their natural cause and effect. So even though Imam Hussein alayhi salam had the power of kun fayakun, he didn't use it in Karbala. He had to fight. He had to sacrifice his life to create a revolution. In the same way, when the 12th Imam alayhi salam returns, even though he may have tremendous power, he's not going to snap his fingers and the whole world will become enlightened and problems will resolve themselves. There will be problems, there will be wars, there will be fights, there will be casualties on the Muslim side. And yet we say he will establish a government where there will be peace and there will be no strife and no crime and no, there will be love and there will be no hatred for each other and there won't be any illnesses. And so how will this perfect world emerge? It ties totally to this idea that until and unless human beings have attained a level where they are now becoming enlightened, where they're now discovering who they really are, the platform is not there for him to come and establish a government. So what we're discussing is very relevant to Islam. And if anyone asks you, why are you discussing this? The simple answer is we are preparing for our Imam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we continue with the third cause of suffering, which was identifying oneself with one's mind. Now, the single most important and most vital step one can take towards enlightenment is to disidentify with the mind, is to realize that I am not the thinker in my mind. Out of all the different things we have discussed so far, the outdated methods of solving problems, living in the past or the future, this is the most important. That a human being should understand that I am not the thinker. I am not the one that's making all this noise in my head. And not being able to stop thinking is a dreadful affliction. It is a great source of suffering. But because everybody is suffering in the same way, we think it's very normal. Okay, we think this is how most human beings should be. And I'm not trying to make you schizophrenic or create a split personality in you by telling you there is a thinker in you, but that is the reality. There was a great philosopher, a French philosopher known as René Descartes, who studied and tried to understand, do we really exist or not? And he thought he had stumbled upon the greatest human secret when he made the famous statement that said, I think, therefore I am. Yet that is the biggest misconception human beings have ever had. That is the biggest false statement you could make, that I think, therefore I am. It is because you think that you are not. Because this false identity creates this idea that I am the thinker. We talked about the ego and the sense of I-ness and how it forms from childhood and so on. This idea that I am the thinker, it creates this veil or this opaque screen that comes between all forms of true relationships. Whether it is a relationship between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it is a relationship between you and other people, or whether it is a relationship between you and yourself. The veil is the same thing, not realizing that I am not the thinker. So I have told you extensively who you are not, but who are we? This is what we want to come to. So tonight we introduce a second technique of disidentifying from the ego, or disidentifying from this false me or the false I. This new technique is called becoming the watcher, or watching the thinker inside you. And this is another powerful way in which one slowly begins to understand who one really is. Now, what do we mean by saying, watch the thinker in you? You might have seen some mad people on the streets. You can find lots of them downtown. Or if you've come from other countries, other cities, I'm sure there were no shortages of such people. If you think about it very carefully, most people are mad actually. Not just the ones you see on the streets out there that we call mad. The difference between those that we call mad and us is that those who are mad, they don't know how to hide their thoughts. They vocalize them. What is our identity of a madman? You see him walking and he's talking to himself. Sometimes he's talking to a tree or to a bench, or he's just talking to himself. But what are we doing most of the time? We are also talking to ourselves. So what is the difference between the madman and me? Most of us are mad. That is the truth. We call them mad because they are not intelligent enough to hide their madness. We are clever. We don't show it. We keep it inside. All we have to do is all those complaints and likes and dislikes and speculations and that voice in the head. If we start saying it, people will say he's mad as well. Otherwise, there is absolutely no difference. When we realize this, then suddenly there is a shift in our consciousness, because now we start paying attention. And this is the technique that I'm introducing here. What I'm suggesting is listen to the voice in your head. Pay attention. And in particular, pay attention to the things that are repeated, the things that are repetitive, like an old gramophone that keeps playing again and again all the time. And as you do that, you stumble upon a very great secret. And that secret is that there is two things. There is me and there is myself. Or there is you and there is yourself. You begin to realize that you now have the ability to sit and watch your mind as it is thinking. Have you ever done that? If you haven't, go home and try this as well. It's very possible. You might think it's impossible. If you always have been trapped in the mind, you might think, like, what is he saying? This doesn't make sense. But the same technique we suggested yesterday. Sit in a place, take a few deep breaths, relax, and then watch your mind. And you will actually see you have the ability to watch your mind while it is thinking. And that will tell you that you are not the thinker. It's like watching the sky on a bright blue day and there is white puffy clouds sailing by. And you sit there and you watch the clouds. One of them comes in and then moves away. And then another one comes in and it moves away. You can actually sit and watch thoughts coming into your mind. They come in, they leave. They come in, they leave. At first, it will be very short gaps. You will not be able to hold your attention for that long. But with time, you will be amazed because you will find you can watch, you can become the witnessing presence. You can become the shahid of your mind, which is the mashhud. And what is unique, and this is the real you, by the way. If we have been in search, if I've been saying all along, you're not the thinker, you're not the one who is the I, who am I? This is you. The one who watches when your mind is thinking, that is the real you. And that real you doesn't need thought to exist. It doesn't cease to exist because your thinking has stopped. And you will also notice that when you are watching the thinker in you, there is a sense of peace that comes in. There is a stillness that comes into your heart. You find that this real me that is watching the mind does not judge. It does not get excited. It does not get angry. It does not express any emotion. It's like a wise sage. It just silently watches with a lot of compassion and love. And the more we identify with that as being me and not the thinker, we begin to shift in our consciousness and we start moving towards enlightenment. Now, you may be thinking that I'm suggesting that you put yourself in a trance, that you sit at home and you start meditating and you suddenly lose consciousness of who you are. I'm not suggesting that at all. If the price of having inner peace was to lose consciousness or to be in a trance, then it wouldn't be worth pursuing. Because you wouldn't be able to do anything. You'd have to sit at home the whole day and just sit there with your legs crossed, just meditating. What I'm suggesting is that while you are eating, while you are talking to people, while you're going to work, while you're doing your work, reach a level where we can watch our mind thinking while we are performing our day-to-day tasks. A person who is enlightened is more alert than we are. He's not in a trance. He is more alert. He is even more aware of what's happening around him. That is why when the wife of Abu Sufyan hired a slave in the battle of Uhud, she said to him, I want you to kill one of three people, either the Prophet or Ali or Hamza. Then his conclusion, he says, I have watched all of three in battle. The Prophet is impossible to kill because he has too many people around him. Ali is impossible to kill because he is very alert. You can't get near him. My only chance is Hamza. That is why you look at all the Imams and all those close to the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, nobody could kill them in single combat. Look at Karbala, for example, whether it was Qasim or Ali al-Akbar or Hazrat Abbas or Imam Hussein. The only way they could kill them was when they came in swarms and started throwing stones and spears and arrows. But single combat, they could not kill them. You cannot kill an enlightened person in single combat because he is so alert, he is so present. He knows exactly, you cannot surprise him. Right? And so we're not saying that you put yourself in a trance. We say as you watch the thinker, you develop a new meaning of peace within you, a new meaning of stillness inside you, and you disidentify from the chattering of the mind. Now there is a question here that comes that says, what is wrong with using the mind all the time? I can accomplish a lot of tasks with my mind. I use it all the time. I solve crossword puzzles, I build things, Now just because we can use our mind to solve a crossword puzzle or build an atom bomb doesn't mean we are using our mind. Because the mind, as we identified, it needs constant thought to keep the ego alive. So just like a dog that loves to get a bone and then dig its teeth into it and chew it, the mind needs something that it can put its teeth into and work with all the time. It needs something to solve. It needs a crossword puzzle. It needs a challenge. It needs Give me something to do. Give me something. It gets bored very easily. And it constantly needs something to keep it occupied. Are you using your mind? Or is your mind using you? That is the question. And the answer is very simple. And we mentioned this yesterday as well. Can we stop thinking by choice? Have you found the off button to your constant thought process? If you say, I can't stop myself thinking by choice, then you do not use your mind. Your mind is using you. We are possessed. Like we say a person is possessed by the devil. We are possessed with this false ego, and we are not even aware. So the beginning of enlightenment, the beginning of acquiring ma'rifat of Allah, the beginning of removing this veil and this illusion that stops us from realizing how connected we are from Allah, the beginning of the end of all forms of negative suffering, is to bring this realization that I am not my mind, and my mind has taken me hostage. And that if I stop using my mind, if there isn't thoughts coming into my mind, if I'm just in a state of peace, I will not cease to exist. If anything, I will understand my existence to be even stronger and more important than what I always thought to be. And as we begin to watch our mind and observe it, there are two very important realizations that slowly come into our mind. That not into our mind, but into our being. There are two very important realizations. One is the realization that there is a world or a realm of intelligence that is vast and much, much more than the mind. And that our thinking is a very small part of that intelligence. That there is a world out there that we haven't even seen, that can be seen without going through the mind. We begin to appreciate that, because now we begin to sense a presence without using the mind. And the second realization that will come with time, these are things that are easy to say, but they need practice. The second realization that will come is that everything that truly matters in life, happiness, joy, love, inner peace, creativity, anything that really counts at the end of the day, comes from a place that is beyond the mind. It doesn't come through the thinking process and through the mind. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, that when we talk about these things, there is always a question that comes to the mind. How Islamic is this? Where are we getting this from? Is this psychology? Is this from Buddhism? Is this from this religion or that? How relevant and how substantiated is this from Islam? So I want to take a moment and give you some proofs of this from the Quran and Hadith, so that we understand that there is, and as I mentioned yesterday, there is a lot in Quran and Hadith. We just need to explore and discover this. When we get past the rituals, when we get past the day-to-day things that we need to know, then we find there is treasures in Islam that can really change a person and take him to new heights of perfection. There is a verse in the Quran in Surah Al-Hadid, which is chapter 57, verse 23 or 24, where Allah first mentions why He sends afflictions on people. He talks about the musibah or the bala that He sends on people. Then He gives a reason as to why He does that. He says, لِكَيْ لَا تَأْسَوْا عَلَى مَا فَاتَكُمْ وَلَا تَفْرَحُوا بِمَا آتَاكُمْ, so that you may not grieve over what you lose, nor rejoice over what you gain. This is the verse. That we send afflictions on you, Surah Al-Hadid, chapter 57, verse 23. We send afflictions on you, لِكَيْ لَا تَأْسَوْا عَلَى مَا فَاتَكُمْ وَلَا تَفْرَحُوا بِمَا آتَاكُمْ, that you should not grieve over what you lose, and you should learn not to rejoice over what you gain. Now, there is a commentary to this verse from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says, that this verse of the Quran defines the perfect zahid. It defines zuhud in its most perfect sense. Zuhud is loosely translated as asceticism. One who forsakes the pleasures of this world for the hereafter is called a zahid or a zahida. So Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, whosoever can practice this verse, his zuhud is perfect. He has taken zuhud from both sides. Now my question to you is, so long as we identify ourselves as being the thinker, so long as we think that the person suffering and going through the emotions and getting angry and getting depressed and worrying and anxiety is me, how can you practice this? It is impossible. The only time you will be able to practice this verse of the Quran is when you can observe your mind almost as if you are a third person. When you perfect your understanding of who I am to such a degree that outwardly you may be suffering intensely physically or emotionally, but inwardly you are watching. You are watching how the mind brings out anger. You are watching the surge of emotion to say something. Then you control it. You decide, should I say it or not? You don't let the mind control you. You watch. When you're upset, when somebody says something to hurt you, when you lose something, when you're depressed, when you're upset, when you're worried, you're now watching the mind as it worries. It is only when you do this that you will be able to practice. لِكَيْ لَا تَأْسَوْا عَلَى مَا فَاتَكُمْ وَلَا تَفْرَحُوا بِمَا أَتَاكُمْ. Otherwise, show me how else. There is a hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And we've all heard these hadith. Mutu qablan tamutu. Die before you die. Tell me what this hadith means. What does it mean, die before you die? The first die is an order. That means Rasulullah is saying it's in your hands to control. Die. Before you die. The second die is the physical death that you have no control over. How do you die before you die? You can't die twice. What is he saying except this? That let your ego die before your physical body dies. Dissolve that false illusion of I-ness before you lose the chance of doing that. When a person is facing death and is dying, it's not the physical pain that will worry him. It's the confusion. And there is this sense of, I'm going mad. Even when we suffer a lot of affliction, when somebody we love passes away, or when something, a tribulation of, happens that really takes over our mind and confuses us, we feel like, I'm going mad. What's happening when you feel I'm going mad? The ego is now threatened. That illusion is breaking apart, and it's trying to hold it together. That this can't be happening to me. I can't be dying. It can't be. Why is this happening to me? Surrendering to Allah is learning to let this drop and dissolve. Not being afraid that if this ceases to exist, I will die. And it is so difficult that the normal human ego will fight and become physically violent, but it will not allow the ego to dissolve. Because it believes that if the ego dies, I will die. So it's easy to talk about this, but to become enlightened is very difficult. You have to experience something more than physical death, more perhaps greater in intensity than physical death. Physical death is easy. But when a person dies physically, they have no choice. The ego will dissolve because it's an illusion. It's not real. So if we prepare beforehand, then the physical death becomes easy. There are no surprises. A person who is enlightened does not fear death anymore because they have been through, mutu qablan tamutu. They have gone through that phase of death. It is when we haven't gone through it, when we ignore it, when we stubbornly refuse to believe we are not the thinker, that there will be discomfort and surprises at the time of dying. Then there is a hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. He says, الناس نيام إذا ماتوا انتبهوا. People are asleep. When they die, they wake up. What does this hadith mean? Same thing. People are asleep. People are unconscious. People are not aware of who they are. When they die, they wake up. Remember what we said about waking up, about being alive. The eyes suddenly open. Oh, this is who I am. So this hadith, because an imam's words are so perfect, it can have multiple meanings. This hadith can mean two things. People are asleep. When they die, they wake up. It could mean that those who die in terms of the death of the ego, they wake up as an enlightened being. Or it can mean that when they die physically, then they will realize who they are not and who they are. So there is ample proof from Quran and Hadith to suggest that this idea of watching the thinker and not identifying with the thinker in us is not at all un-Islamic. There is another question that comes out of this that says, I think I need to research about my mind more deeply before I can practice what you are saying. I need to do some research about how the mind works and understand it, then I can, really practice this. The problem is, the study of madness does not create sanity. You can do a PhD on how the mind works. It won't make you any more enlightened or sane. Because the problem is the mind. So we cannot use the mind to solve the problem of the mind. And so this, what we are suggesting in this second technique of watching the thinker is simply this, that let us be at least as much interested in what's happening inside us as much as we are interested in what's happening outside our world. And let us ask this question to ourselves. What is happening to me inside at this moment? What is my mind producing? Become observant and watch how the mind resists the now. How the mind is constantly fighting to remain in the past or in the future. This, in summary, brings us to the end of our third cause of suffering. Now, for a few minutes, I just want to talk about the ego and the games it plays and how the mind uses different techniques to sustain itself. And again, keeping in mind the time, I will not cover all that material, but I'll talk about some of them. We mentioned yesterday or the day before that because the human ego and the sense of I-ness was created on conflict, and the mind is trying to keep it alive, all the methods that the mind uses to keep this false I alive are all negative forms of suffering. And the mind has only two ways of doing it. One is to constantly create thought, keep mental activities all the time going in the mind. The other is pain. The mind is trying to remove pain from our lives, but in trying to do so, it's creating more pain, because the methods that it is using to remove pain are all negative. So what we do is we begin to watch in ourselves any sign of anger, any sign of irritation, any sign of rage, any sign of depression, and realize that this is the ego trying to survive like any other form any other life form that is trying to survive. Anything negative that you can create in your life will help the ego. It will sustain it. It will make it stronger. It will make the veil stronger. All the mind wants is something negative to feed on. And once we begin to feed the mind with pain, it wants more pain. You ask anyone that you are addicted to pain, they will tell you, no. Why would I want pain? I don't want pain. But think about the way we behave and the way we think when we're trying to resolve problems. And you will see that every method we use is to invite pain, even though we deny this and say, I don't want pain. I'll give you some examples that you will be able to. There are three main methods that the mind uses to create pain. which it thinks it's trying to resolve, but it's actually sustaining the ego and strengthening it and causing more harm. Attack, defense, and withdrawal. Now, whether you talk of anger, anxiety, boredom, depression, stress, worry, rage, inferiority complex, anxiety, any negative form of suffering can be divided into these three: attack, defense, or withdrawal. Some are very obvious. For example, you shout at someone. That's attack. Somebody shouts at you. You shout back. That's defense. Somebody shouts at you. You withdraw. You become quiet. You stop talking. This is supposed to be a problem with men, apparently. That when they have an argument at home, and if their wife says, they withdraw. They become quiet. They stop talking. This withdrawal is also a drama. It's not just shouting that is a drama. Even withdrawal is a form of drama that is to invite pain. So let's take first the example of blame. The mind believes that if I'm suffering pain, if I transfer this pain to somebody else, the problem will go away. So notice how now we are watching our mind. As soon as there is a problem, the first instinctive desire is look for someone to blame. And it comes so naturally. And observe what we say when we have a problem. Let's say you keep something here and I'm walking and I trip on it. Do I say, I didn't see it, so I tripped? Or do I say, you kept this here, so I tripped? You kept this here, that means I'm looking for someone, that it's too painful to deal with. So look for someone to offload it on. I couldn't sleep last night because you were snoring too much. It was okay, but I know you were tired, but I couldn't sleep. You look for someone to blame. I was late because you didn't show up on time. Or the moment you say you did, or because you, the moment you say you in a negative context, the idea is because of you I am suffering today. And one of the greatest challenges of becoming an enlightened human being is learning to take responsibility for our actions. Everybody has a problem with their parents, for example, right? There's always a problem, especially when you grow older. It's like they say grandparents and grandchildren get along very well because they have a common enemy, right? So either it's the child or it's the parent. I am what I am today because my parents, they didn't bother to give me good education. My parents, they didn't do this. Or we blame on the children. Because of you, I couldn't study more. Because of you, I couldn't do this. Because of you, that's why I am suffering. This is a quick way the mind is seeking to offload that responsibility. And this is a great obstacle, by the way, in becoming enlightened. And it's very important. It's called the blame game. It's very famous. Everybody knows about this. You can even coin the word at home. When somebody blames, just say you're playing the blame game. Don't blame. Sometimes, yes, that person is responsible. But now that it has happened to you, it's your problem. Don't say you. It's always your problem. And the moment you stop blaming, you begin to realize that you have become a better person. The other problem is inferiority complex. Everyone is bad, only I am good. If you praise somebody in front of me, I immediately jump in and say something negative or say something about me. I'm also, right? If you say something bad to me, immediately argue back because, backbiting comes from the same thing. I can't be like this other person, so bring him down to my level, right? These are all tactics that the mind uses to sustain the ego. Irritability, getting irritated over small things, being overly sensitive. You're sitting at home, a car passes by. You get irritated. Why did you create that irritation? Or a dog barked, you get irritated. Why did you create? You didn't create it, the mind created it. Why did the mind create that irritation? Because the mind believes that if it resists, the problem will dissolve. But what it doesn't realize is that the resistance it is creating is causing more suffering. If it was to just sit there and let that sound just go through you as if you are transparent and not make a deal out of it, it wouldn't have irritated you. And then depending on the society we live in, we get more and more sensitive. If you look at the Time magazine, for example, April 5th, one of the latest issue, April 5th Time magazine, there's something about noise pollution and so on. It says in Paris, when one motorbike passes on a street at night, it wakes up 200,000 people. One motorbike, if it passes on the street at night, it wakes up 200,000 people. Now, when we were in Africa, you keep the window open, there's dogs barking, there's drunkards outside, there's lorry and trucks and all passing by, and you don't even know what's happening. There's a clock. Now, if the clock is ticking, you get irritated. It bothers. If the light is a bit on, I can't sleep. This oversensitivity is also the mind trying to use. It believes that by resisting this, it will dissolve the problem. But all it is doing is creating more tension and more. Boredom is another cause. There is still, I don't want to rush through all of them because some of these are important that we talk about. So we'll talk about boredom, we'll talk about worry, we'll talk about being more tolerant basically to those that we live with and those that we work with. And we'll go even beyond the family. Sometimes we volunteer in places. We help out at the mosque, at the Jamaat level, at the madrasa level, whatever level it may be. Do something with love or don't do it. To do it with resentment in the heart is to create negativity in yourself and in others. We are polluting ourselves and polluting others at a more psychic level that we don't realize. So we'll talk about, about all these different methods. Let me just mention very quickly, again, what I mean by saying we are unconscious and we don't realize what is really happening around us, and we miss the real relationship between people because we are so caught up in this trying to defend the ego. Unconsciousness, if you can catch yourself ever complaining in words or in thoughts, whenever you catch yourself complaining, even in the mind, you may be complaining about the weather, you may be complaining about a situation you are in, you may be complaining about what somebody said or did to you. Any kind of complaint is negative because you perceive yourself as a victim. You're not happy with what you have. You want something you don't have. And we talked about this at length yesterday. And the solution really is to address it, communicate, talk to the person, resolve it, and then part in love. But not to hold resentment in the heart and to keep it within us. A lot of us, when we talk to people, we don't really listen to them when they're talking. There's two kinds of listening. True listening, true human relationship, is when you listen to someone without the interference of the mind. And a lot of people don't know how to do that. I know I don't know how to do that. It takes a lifetime sometimes to learn just how to listen. When you want to listen to someone, put the mind aside. We talk to someone, but while they're talking to us, our mind is working at full speed. We are passing judgment about them. We're already, making conclusions about what they want to say. We're already thinking of the answer that we're going to give them. We're not really with them. We're not listening to them. We already got our own mind creating its own, answers and what we, and that's not really listening. Listening is you listen to someone with your whole being. You stop the mind from interfering. And you listen with such presence that the person feels that you are listening, can feel the love coming from you. And this can happen at home with a relationship. This can happen with people outside. Listen with your whole being without passing any judgment. Just be there for the person and think, suspend the mind. And when the mind is running havoc and creating all these answers and judgments and speculations and complaints, watch the mind. Just watch it. When we watch the mind, it is very important that we don't judge. Even when you watch your mind, don't judge at that point. Because if you start judging and making conclusions, again you are in the mind. The idea is to be just a witness. Just watch the mind, and you will begin to see that there is me, and then there is the thinker in me, which is not the real me. And the more we become enlightened, the less you will see negative forms of behavior in ourselves. You will always see that a person who is more enlightened, that person is not mean, that person is not rude, that person is very rarely sarcastic, that person is very rarely blames others, that person is very rarely depressed or worried or anxious. It's a gradual process. It's not this or that where you're totally a mess or you're totally enlightened. It's a gradual process. And as we struggle individually, it raises the whole community's awareness of what the problems are. And that's why you will see Islam condemns all these things like backbiting and so on. Because backbiting is also the same thing. It's all these negative forms of suffering that feeds the ego. And then it rips the community apart. It's like a cancer. A community that is vibrant, that is ready to serve Allah, that is there to do good work, suddenly because of gossiping and backbiting and breaking each other and trying to dominate. You see, power over others is weakness. It's not strength. And so we will, inshallah, talk about some of these issues and continue on them tomorrow. If you can recite aloud, Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.